Welcome everyone to Real Estate with Gwen Price. And I love bringing topics to my clients and the public. And today we're going to talk about insurance. I'm with Louise Essiembre, and she's a local insurance agent here in town. And we're going to talk about some of the things that come up in underwriting for house insurance. Hi, Louise.
Hi, Gwen. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, as a realtor, I run across this all the time. Years ago, when I first started, insurance was a slam dunk. We didn't have to worry about it. It was just a given that everybody was going to have house insurance, and as a requirement of the mortgage coverage, you have to have proof of insurance. And we just never even worried about it. But over time, things have changed in the insurance industry.
It sure has. Yes, most definitely. The insurance world is changing all the time. Underwriters are requesting more information. They're requesting certain updates to be completed. For example, actually, for the electrical panels, insurance companies don't typically accept the 60 amps on fuse panels anymore. It needs to be converted to breakers and to have at least 100 amps. And that's for rental as well. And so the rental units would need to have 100 amps on breakers. Now, I mean, it does happen that it's very expensive to change the electrical panel like that. However, we do have some specialty markets that we'll consider, but evidently there will need to be a promise to change the panel eventually.
So
And with
this,
those,
sorry, is it just with regards to 60 amp, or whenever, even if you have 100 or 200 amp service, if the panels fuses, are you going to have to change that?
if they are fuses, it is definitely recommended to change to breakers, even if there's 100 amps.
But
Um,
can you
mhm.
still get coverage, at least for the time being, say, or does it affect your premiums?
It will definitely affect the premium if we have to place you with a specialty market. The premiums of specialty markets are a little bit more expensive, and the coverages are not as great as our standard markets, typically speaking. If you are currently insured for property insurance and you are moving into a home where the electrical panel may not be quite updated, sometimes we are able to get exceptions to allow the risk on a policy. And we can negotiate with the insurance company and the client to determine a fair amount of time to make those changes.
Because there's a few things that come up in my business, that's for sure. The electrical is one, and I don't run across knob and tube anymore. Not that often, maybe once every 2 years now, because so many houses have been updated. But knob and tube is a big one, right? If it is there, it's an issue for sure.
Yes, most definitely.
Yep. Aluminum wiring, I was telling you before we started, I've had in the past year 2 situations with aluminum wiring. And I and my clients were surprised that there are more stringent requirements now if you have aluminum wiring. Maybe talk a bit about that.
Yes, definitely. So with aluminum wiring, it is typically accepted with most insurance market. However, an ESA report needs to be completed, and the electrician would need to confirm that the aluminum wiring is safe and does not need to be changed.
Because it's the connection when somebody goes and they're updating and they put one of those new receptacles and they're attaching it to the existing aluminum wiring, the connection is different than in a house that isn't, that is regular copper wiring, right? It's that connection that's so important. And from what I understand, every single outlet receptacle has to be changed or have that approved connection.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was an eye opener this past year because I of course, so in my career have dealt with aluminum wiring, and I knew it was different, and you had to be aware of the connection issue, but I did not know about the ESA, and
Mhm.
that every outlet, everything had to be properly wired, which makes sense, but you don't realize either until you're dealing with it, right?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, so the other thing that comes up a lot for me too as a realtor is shingles. Because
Mhm.
oftentimes, again, people go about their lives, they don't necessarily get up on their roof and check. And that is one of the questions that when an insurance company is going to write a policy, they want to know the age of the shingles.
Yeah, exactly. I believe we're looking at between 15 to 20 years for shingles.
Mm. And
Yeah, it
somewhere
is.
faster because depends who put them on and was it done properly, and also the
Exactly.
type of shingle and the exposure, right? When it's exposed to a lot of sun, it's going to wear faster. Is there proper ventilation? There's a lot more that goes into it than just slapping some shingles on.
Right. And something we do come across often is when the shingles were repaired, but not completely replaced.
Hmm.
So we have a percentage scale that we use. And if, we need to make sure that the client is aware that the roof was completely changed, let's say in the last 10 or 15 years, and not just patched up, because you can have some part of that roof that may be more than the 15 to 20 years old, where at that point it would need to be replaced.
So oftentimes, because they deal with a lot of seniors, oftentimes they can't afford, to do the shingles, so they're selling it the way it is. Does the new homeowner are they allowed, like we were talking about electrical, are they given a certain amount of time to change those shingles? Can they get coverage on closing day? But how long do they have to change those shingles?
If they are currently insured for property insurance, sometimes an exception can be made for that as well to allow 30 to 60 days, depending on the insurance markets, to change those shingles, to repair them, and to put some new one on. However, oftentimes, again, we may need to put the policy with a substandard market, where at that point they may even exclude any claims related to the roof. And with regular markets as well, sometimes we are able to get that exception. So we will just add the roof warranty, which would mean that if anything would happen, any claim that would arise that would be caused by the roof leaking, then that would be declined off the policy. So that's why it's really, really important to make sure that the heating, the plumbing, roofing, as well as the electrical, and even the hot water tanks have been all changed or replaced within the last 15 years.
Okay, yeah, because I was just going to ask you about the hot water tank, because that's another thing in the last few years that is one of the questions that's asked. I mean, a lot of people have the renting the hot water tank, so it's easy enough to call up the rental company and say, okay, it's old, I need a new one or whatever. But when you own it, you're responsible for keeping that up to date.
Yes,
And
exactly.
I mean, because there's been often how many basements might have a flood situation because of those hot water tanks. So I get why that's changed over the years because I never would hear that either. Like,
Hmm.
water tank. So yeah, that's some of the things that come up. But well, and sewer backup. Um, I think a lot of people they don't even know what's in their policy. Does it have sewer backup coverage?
And a lot
Does
of
it
clients believe for some reason, well, not for some reason, but a lot of clients believe that if they're on a hill or they don't have a basement or that they live in an apartment building, that they don't need sewer backup coverage. I've seen claims occur for every single situation that I just mentioned.
really?
And a sewer backup claim can easily reach 55 to 60,000. If it's in a high rise and the client, let's say, the neighbor upstairs, there was to be a sewer backup. Oftentimes that water seeps through the walls all the way down. So those damages can go really, really high, the amount of the damages that it can cause.
Yeah, because that's
Sometimes up
not
to
just,
150,000.
oh yeah, because that's not just water going through. That is contaminated water, which then, yes, that doesn't take long for things to happen, mold, all of this. You've got contaminated substances there. So yeah, it's an important coverage and everybody should check their policy for that.
Most definitely, yes. It should, like the policy should have at least a minimum of 100,000 for sewer backup. That's just a like a single family dwelling. 100,000 would should be sufficient, but again, the higher the limit, the better.
And it's funny, I've also run across in my career a few people that have no insurance coverage on their house, which I found shocking because I find it's one of the insurances. I mean, yeah, nothing is insignificant in purchasing insurance, but I find considering what it's covering, the value is there, right? You, especially now as property values have risen, your property that you paid 30,000 for back in the day is now worth 300,000 plus. And if something happens to that, if it burns to the ground and you have no coverage, you've got a piece of property.
And that's a misconception that a lot of people have, is that the insurance is to satisfy the lender's requirements, when in reality, it just benefits the client. I've had a situation happen, and this was years ago, and my client in question really liked dealing with me. However, he just did not like insurance. He did not think he had to pay for insurance. He says he had a goal that as soon as he was going to be mortgage free, that he would cancel the insurance. And even though I tried to explain to him, it's not just for your lender. In case something happens, although you're mortgage free, imagine if your home was to completely burn down, you need the insurance in place in order to rebuild. You don't want to start from the ground up again. You've worked so hard.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure enough, Gwen,
Oh,
4 months later, his house completely burnt down.
that is, I mean, I know it's mind boggling. I'm always shocked when I hear that because it's your most, typically it's your most valuable asset, right? It's
Exactly,
not talking
exactly.
like a deposit in the bank, which is great if you've got a deposit in the bank of 300, 500,000, but I don't know that many people that necessarily have that, but they have an asset sitting there that has no coverage on it.
Right.
You know, and you hope that nobody ever has to go through that, but it happens, and it's
Of course.
surprising how many times fires happen, and there could be significant damage, or like I say, even the sewer backup that can be very significant if you're in a fair sized property, right?
Exactly.
What about all of these oh, we're talking about climate change now, which it's all a big unknown, but it seems like we're dealing more and more with flooding. And I know, I've looked on our zoning maps, and you can see, where there's fringe flood plains, or you're right in a floodplain. And fortunately, we're not like some of the coastlines where they're having significant, but overland water we were talking about, that's a significant thing that can happen to people, right?
Yeah, so exactly. Especially if somebody does live by a river, by a lake, or just anywhere where the flooding zones are really high. It's important to have the overland coverage on the policy. But even rain would be considered overland water as well. So even if the client doesn't live near the water, then again, it would still be important to have the overland water coverage, because we just never know.
Yeah, we can have a torrential downpour. I mean, luckily Sudbury doesn't have that often, but it can happen and if it happens when was it? I remember one year, it might have been around this time of year, where the ground is frozen and we get this significant rainfall, and water wants to find its way in. It doesn't care, right? So it will find its way into your house if the surrounding land can't handle it, or the sewer. Um, things are blocked in the middle of winter, but even in the summertime, if it comes down fast enough, it just can't be handled by the system. So it's going to go somewhere, right? And you don't want it in your basement, but if it happens, you want to make sure that you've got that coverage.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. So there's so many things, like I say, but a lot of these are the things that kind of typically come up in my world on a regular basis. And we, even over the years, we started putting conditional on getting insurance in offers, because oftentimes it's not necessary. It is all about the house as well, but sometimes the client too. And maybe nobody wants to give them any coverage because they're a bad risk, right? They got a few things. So and when we were going unconditional on offers, it got a little, it could be a little hair raising at the end if somebody wasn't able to get coverage for a particular house. So
Well, I can tell you this, Gwen, 98% of the time, I am able to find coverage for the client.
that's
Oftentimes, it might be placed on a specialty policy with one of our substandard markets, but at the end of the day, they'll still be able to obtain that insurance.
yeah, and close the deal, because the lawyer is looking, especially when there's a mortgage in place, right? The lawyer is looking for proof of insurance coverage before closing, so that everybody knows, yes, because right in the offer, in the fine print, it's that it can be insured against risk of fire. And it has happened over the years too. I could think of a couple of situations where the house burned to the ground before closing, and how do you handle that, right? So
Right.
insurance, it's there to protect us. Yeah, nobody wants, it's like buying tires for my car. I don't know. I don't like either, but I have to do it, right? For safety, for security. And when you think about your house, again, that's your most valuable asset. So you want
Exactly.
proper coverage, because most people can't pull that kind of money out of their pocket to pay for some big ticket item that comes up, right? So, well, that's great information, and I'll be putting your contact information at the end on the post, and making sure that people can check with you, and and out, like I say, every now and then you got to check, because every company can have different requirements, and maybe one suits you better than that, or maybe you need to change, your life circumstances has changed, so it's always good to check. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much, Louise. Always great information, and you're very easy to talk to, so I'm sure some of my clients will be turning to you for their insurance needs. Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you, Gwen. I appreciate it.
Okay, take care.
You as well.